So you've got geared up. If you haven't, check out my previous video on selecting your spearfishing gear. Ready to go? Wait, before you go out for the first time, it's really important to get an understanding of safety and potential issues you may run into. As a beginner, be conservative. If you're unsure whether it's safe or not, don't go out. With time, you'll learn what you're comfortable or uncomfortable with, but play it safe in the beginning. I will divide this in 3 parts. Number 1 is the environment. That's the ocean, the weather. Number 2 is the gear. We've covered which gear you'll need, but here I'll go over gear safety. Number 3, yourself and your buddy. I'll explain more later. So in this video, I'll cover environment. Hey, just a quick one. As I was editing this video, I was thinking a lot of this stuff is obvious and kind of common sense, and it's making the video unnecessarily long and maybe boring. And so I was going to just cut out most of it and kind of just cover high-level safety. But then I realized that time and time again, I see people getting themselves into bad situations for these exact same reasons, even though they might seem obvious. So I decided to leave everything in. So let me know what you think. Is this too long? Is it unnecessary? Too obvious? Or is it useful for a beginner spearo, somebody who's just starting out? Now let's get on to the video. Depending on where you live, this may be more or less of a concern. For example, if you're diving in the Mediterranean and you're diving in summer and hopefully away from boat traffic, then picking a nice, sunny and calm day shouldn't be a problem. And that solves most, though not all, of your environmental issues. If you're diving in a place where the ocean is open, such as anywhere along the coast of Australia, for example, most of the coast of North America or even Africa, the weather can be a lot more unpredictable and also a lot more rough. So what makes a good or bad weather? Well, first, there's wind and chop. Strong winds mean rough water. It can be tough to get in without being smashed into rocks, and it can be tough to safely get out of the water. A lot of wind can also create water spray on the surface, making it hard to breathe. In general, when you're getting started, you're looking for as calm a day as possible. Any wind over, let's say, 15 knots, and I'd say call it off. Number 2 is swell. So obviously swell is created by wind, but it's created by offshore wind, which means you can have a calm day on the coast and still have large swell. Luckily, your weather apps should be able to tell you the current swell conditions and forecast. When I was starting out, the older guys in the club said, look for swell under 1 meter, or that's about 3 feet. And I think that's great advice. It again comes down to being able to get out from the shore into the ocean and also being able to get back in onto the shore, out, however you look at it. Any larger swell and this becomes difficult. So definitely not recommended when you're starting out. So with the chop and swell, the important thing if diving from shore is to know your entry and exit locations. Check out the shore from a high point if possible and see where it looks like it will be easy to get in and out of the water. You don't want to just jump in from a rock with no plan how you're going to get out. Also, keep in mind the weather can change quickly. So while you may be getting in to a calm ocean, half an hour later, it may be rough. So first, keep an eye on the conditions and get out quickly if things are starting to look bad. And second, it's good to have a backup option. Beach is always easier than rocks once waves start breaking on those rocks. So if you're getting in where the rocks are, see if there's a beach nearby you can use as backup option if you can't get back out onto the rocks. So when diving, rain doesn't really make a difference. You're wet anyway, right? Heavy rain can reduce visibility outside of the water, so you can literally find yourself unable to tell where the shore is, and that can obviously be very, very dangerous. And the same goes for boats, as other boats may not be able to see you. So a little rain is not a problem, but if heavy rain is forecast, definitely think twice before going out. And then it's about what comes after the rain. If you live near a big city, there will be runoff. So even if it's not raining, but you had a lot of rain in the days prior, the ocean might carry too much fresh water and bacteria that might be harmful. It's not something we often think about. And again, it depends on where you live and where you dive. I dive about 40 kilometers or more offshore, so it doesn't matter. But when I lived in a big city and dived in the bay, it definitely made a difference. You don't want to get sick from street or sewage runoff. And then aside from the weather, there's the current state of the ocean. Primarily, this is visibility, tide, currents, and temperature. So first, tides and currents. In some places, this isn't really a safety factor. If there are no currents and no tight points through which the tide needs to go, it's less of a problem. And for this, you will need to ask people locally. It doesn't have to be spearos. Any scuba divers or swimmers in the area will know as well. But in other cases, currents can be very strong and dangerous, or you may have very strong tides which translate into currents or running water. For example, in Port Phillip Bay, Melbourne, there is this tiny little passage through which an enormous amount of water has to enter and exit as the tides shift. And it's happened many times that someone was sucked out of the bay into the open ocean if they found themselves near that passageway at the wrong time. So be aware of tides, of any strong currents that may be present in the area, and obviously avoid the times or locations that are known to be dangerous. And this is another place where a float comes in handy as a safety device. If you do get caught in current, being able to hold onto a float and rest can be a real saver. As a side note, the tide will also play a big role in how easy it is to find fish too, but we'll cover that topic another time. And then we've got temperature. This is simply taking into account your gear, primarily wetsuit, and the temperature of the water. If the water is very cold, make sure you're geared up accordingly. And also very important, make sure you have a way to get out of the water at any point. Meaning, you don't want to swim too far out or away from your exit point if you're feeling the cold. With long spearfishing sessions, you can become hypothermic, and obviously that can be dangerous. So always keep in mind getting out of the water might take longer than you anticipated. Let's say the tide turns and you have to swim against it, or you need to use your backup exit point, which is further away. So be aware of how you're feeling and don't push it. Okay, visibility. Now, visibility is something you won't find in weather apps. And why does it matter? Well, it's hard to hunt fish if you can't see them. And depending on other factors, it can also make your dive more dangerous or simply far less enjoyable. So there are only two ways to find out. Either get a report from someone, and you'll see those questions often asked in Facebook groups, or, especially if you're close to the area you want to dive, check it out yourself. Now, you don't need to jump into the water to be able to tell what the visibility is like. If you look at the water, especially from a high vantage point, you can tell how well you can see the bottom. This is something you'll need to learn. You won't be very great at it at the beginning. So before you dive, have a look and try to guess what the visibility will be like. Then once you get in, see what your prediction was like. And with time, you'll get better at it. One tip, use polarized sunglasses. They take the reflection off the surface and make it easier to see into the water. You're looking for how clear the rocks or weeds are and how well you can see them to gauge what the visibility is like. The final note about the environment is boats. And it might be the biggest danger of all, really. Again, dive with a buddy. Use floats, all of you use floats, to make sure it's easier for the boats to see you, and in general, just avoid heavily trafficked areas. If there are typical boat lanes, stay out of them. Unfortunately, a lot of boat divers don't know the rules about divers, or are simply not thinking about people being in the water when they drive. So with an engine running on a boat, you've got no chance of hearing somebody yelling if you can't see them. So stay away from boats, and if you have your own boat, display a dive flag, and ideally just have a boatie follow you around. And use high visibility floats. So that's safety as it comes to the environment. Next time, we'll talk about gear safety. If you're enjoying this, please like and subscribe, and check out the link in the description for my newsletter to keep up to date with all the latest stuff I'm putting out.